the prideful warrior and the lesson of humility.
In his prime, the warrior possessed a martial prowess that commanded the admiration of all who knew him. But with adulation came a quiet poison, arrogance. One evening, flushed with wine in a crowded tavern, he loudly proclaimed to the room that his blade was peerless, boasting that he had yet to meet a single opponent worthy of drawing his steel. The very next day, while traveling along a lonely road to a neighboring village, he crossed paths with a youth of perhaps 20 winters. The young man was slender, with the refined, delicate features of a scholar. As they fell into step together and reached a secluded stretch of the forest, the youth suddenly turned to him.
"Senior, I have long heard tales of your great martial skill."
The young man said mildly,
"Have you truly never encountered a formidable enemy?"
"Never." The warrior scoffed without hesitation. The young man offered a faint, knowing smile.
"Is that so? May I see your sword?"
Deceived by the youth's frail appearance, the warrior confidently drew his heavy, tempered blade and handed it over, not taking the request seriously. The young man accepted the weapon with one hand. Then, pinching the thick steel with the fingers of his free hand, he gave a casual flick of his wrist. With a sharp ringing crack, the sturdy blade snapped cleanly in two. The warrior froze in terror, instantly realizing the terrifying gap in their strength. Without missing a beat, the young man drew his own sword, held it to the warrior's throat, stripped him of all his valuables, and vanished down the road. His spirit shattered alongside his blade. The warrior abandoned his martial path. Deeply disillusioned and humbled by his own weakness, he retreated to the quiet anonymity of his hometown and opened a small roadside inn. Several years passed. One evening, a band of 11 travelers crossed his threshold. They were a rugged, imposing group with ravenous appetites. After clearing the inn's entire larder, they were still unsatisfied and brought in fresh game from their own hunt, asking the innkeeper to roast it. When the meat was done, they warmly invited him to sit and drink with them. As the warrior took his seat, his blood ran cold. Sitting in the corner, obscured by the deep hood of his dark cape, was the very same young man who had broken his sword several years prior.
"Bandits!"
the warrior thought, panic gripping his chest.
"I couldn't defeat him when he was alone. Against 11 of them, I am a dead man."
Before he could flee, the young man looked up, recognized him, and offered a loud, cheerful greeting. The warrior sat frozen, overwhelmed by a bitter mix of terror and shame. The young man smiled softly.
"I am deeply sorry, old friend. I was young, foolish, and poisoned by the same arrogance you carried back then. I heard your boast in the tavern that night, and the next day, I tracked you down solely to provoke and humiliate you. It was a cruelty I have long since come to regret."
The warrior sat utterly speechless.
"I took your valuable belongings that day."
The young man continued, reaching into his baggage.
"Today I repay that debt tenfold. Please accept my deepest apologies."
He placed a heavy pouch of 100 gold coins onto the wooden table. When the warrior hesitated, entirely bewildered, the young man laughed warmly.
"A true man does not deceive. Take it with my regrets."
Hearing the genuine sincerity in his voice, the warrior finally accepted the gold. The mood at the table lightened, and the men drank heartily. As the night wore on, the young man confessed what had changed him. Not long after he had robbed the warrior, he too had crossed paths with an opponent vastly superior to himself. He was effortlessly defeated, humiliated, and left broken. Only then did he understand the profound despair he had inflicted on the warrior. Seeking a better path, he eventually fell in with his current companions. They were all masters of their respective martial arts, but more importantly, they had sworn a blood oath to a righteous code, to shield the weak, to leave the innocent in peace, and to ensure that the cruel and the oppressive never escape the blade of justice. Listening to their tales, the warrior found himself deeply moved, his admiration growing for this band of chivalrous brothers. Yet, as he observed them, his eyes kept returning to the youngest among them. He was a tall, brooding boy of perhaps 18, completely taciturn. He did not eat at the main table. Instead, his food was respectfully brought to him in a private corner. The older, seasoned warriors treated this quiet teenager with a profound, almost fearful reverence, the unmistakable deference owed to a leader. After the meal, the boy slipped out into the night alone, vanishing like a ghost until dawn. He was clearly carrying out some solitary mission, but his companions remained fiercely tight-lipped, acting as though nothing had happened. The mystery consumed the warrior. The next morning, as the band packed their horses to leave, he pulled the young man aside and whispered,
"Who is that boy?"
The young man simply smiled, placed a finger to his lips, and rode away. The identity of the silent boy remained a mystery to the warrior forever. However, the very next day, news swept through the village. A notorious and cruel warlord in the neighboring territory had vanished into thin air overnight, leaving no trace behind. The warrior listened to the rumors, a quiet smile touching his lips as he thought of the boy and his 10 brothers. The following morning, the innkeeper went into his storage room, dusted off his old practice forms, and stepped out into the courtyard to train. He resumed the martial path, wielding a blade once more, but for the rest of his days, he never again boasted of his strength.